Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Soul Over Matter podcast. Today's episode, we have a guest. We have Gisele with the Cosmic Laundry. She is an astrologer and she's also a human design guide. So, Gisele, welcome to Soul Over Matter. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. Before we hit record, I was telling Gisele I just love her content, and yeah, we connected via a soul care bundle
Yeah.
of a mutual entrepreneur, and since then I was like, I gotta have you on the podcast. I want to share your wisdom with my audience.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to kind of see just like what magic comes through.
Oh yeah, there's always something in the flow. So, Gisele, can you share how I always say like how things find us? Like, how did astrology find you? How did human design find you?
Yeah, so I love this question. I actually haven't been asked it in this way before. Um, it was really interesting. I feel like it really came to me at a time when I needed it most. I was working as a therapist at that time. And I just started, I was on my own journey of learning more about myself, really trying to figure out what my purpose was and like why I'm here. And it all came in at the same time. So I know for a lot of people, they start with astrology and then they go into human design or vice versa. But I became obsessed with both of them at the exact same time. So I started learning both at the same time. So I feel like that's also why I can blend them together so seamlessly because my understanding of them, I was just learning them bit by bit together. But yeah, it found me about like 6, 7 years ago when I was, working in my dream job, doing all the things that I thought I wanted, and just kind of realized that something was missing. And then I started studying these things just to learn more about myself and then started sharing it with clients, and it just, started to grow from there.
Hmm. There's always that key, right? It's like, well, maybe not always, but I feel, yeah, that's self, right? It's like you started out it for you and then it
Yes.
grew into a business, which is quintessentially what we all desire, right? Something that we fully enjoy and then to help teach others.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this was never the plan. Like I never, if you told me 10 years ago that I was going to be doing this, I would be like, whoa, what are you talking about? This was never the plan. I really just started studying it because I was interested in it and then discovered pretty quickly that I just understand it in a really unique way and just picked it up really quick.
So how did you start getting clients? Like did people just start finding you? Did you like really create that business and like that structure, that plan, right? After
Yeah.
knowing the plan.
Yeah, no, definitely didn't have a business plan. It was not like that at all. I had an Instagram account where I would share different things because I was a public figure then already, just as a therapist. And so I started sharing a little bit about like, oh, I'm learning these things. I'm learning about the moon cycle. I'm learning about, astrology. And I started like slowly pulling it in. And I was just getting so much traction from that. I started doing readings like at my house, at my kitchen table for like $33 just for fun, like just because people would message me and be like, I really want a reading. Um, and then it just kind of kept growing and growing and growing and expanding. And eventually I had to decide, I had to choose between being a therapist or doing this full time. And that was a really, really hard decision to make. But this was definitely, it was not like a planned out, like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to create. It just kind of happened, honestly.
How beautiful. I feel
Yeah.
like so many people pray for that, right? Of like,
Yeah.
not I don't want to say having to choose because choices, as we
Yeah.
know, are always hard in this life. We are
Yeah.
creatures of comfort of our society that we live in, but how beautiful you created it organically, right? It was just
Yeah.
from joy and passion, really.
Yeah.
Self-discovery.
Everything. everything with our business up until this point has been organic. Like even our following, like we never used to run ads or do anything like that. And now just like this past year, I'm like, okay, let's like, this is a business now. I'm recognizing it's a business. It's going to be my thing. I have to start treating it as
Mm.
such. Whereas before I really was still just in that flow state of like, whatever will be, will be. And it's been really fun shifting into starting to treat it like the separate business or entity that it is.
That's a really good point. I feel like a lot of us in the spiritual community, right? We
Yeah.
can be in that like upper chakra, like
Yeah.
flow and not really grounding and structuring our businesses. What other, I don't know, what other tips can you give people for doing that? For like really, yeah, creating like this is my business. I'm a business owner.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think part of it is that I think, we are always being prepared for what our path is, whether we recognize it or not. When I was in college, I was studying obviously like psychology and social work and all the things to become a therapist. But I also had this like side niche interest in entrepreneurship. So I was reading a lot about small business entrepreneurship and just how to build something, but I never thought I would really use that. I was like, I might use this in my private practice, but it was just something I was interested in. And I actually thought that I would end up doing like business psychology, like working with like
Mm.
being kind of an executive coach. And then now, in the past year or so, I've realized like, oh, there's a reason that I was always really interested in that. It's that like those skills are really needed for my mission and for my purpose to really root in on the planet. I also have a Capricorn North Node and it's in the second house. So business is like literally what my soul came
Wow.
to do. Yeah. It's like really foreign to me. I'm not one of those people where it comes naturally or is easy, but it's something that's really rewarding. Like every time I learn something new and I put it into practice, it feels really good.
That's a beautiful placement. Can you talk
Yes.
more about the North Node, second
Yeah.
house? I talk about these things. I'm a very
Yeah.
intuitive astrologer, I call myself, like very self-taught. But yeah, can you talk more about what that means?
Yeah. So the North Node is our spiritual destiny. So in the way that I practice and work with it. So the ironic thing is that everyone thinks that in order to be spiritual or to be enlightened, there's like this one way to do that. And it's like meditating in the Himalayas, like achieving ascension, all of that kind of stuff. But really, like our souls are all here to learn very different things. So there's some of us that are here to actually be a lot more grounded in like the material world, and that's the spiritual path. So the really ironic thing about the North Node is that it speaks to these 12 different ways of accessing spirit or like going on your spiritual path, and not
Mhm.
everybody will align with their North Node. Something that I find is it's one of those parts of the chart you can take it or leave it, and if you leave it then you're gonna do it again in the next lifetime.
Hmm.
And so the spiritual, or I guess like the North Node in general, has so much to do with our path and our destiny and what our soul really wants to fulfill. And I think this is why sometimes you'll see people who they have everything. They have like the house and the kids and the car and the job, and they're still like something is missing. And it's often that North Node that's missing. So the sign that your North Node is in tells you a lot about the energy that you're meant to kind of embody and that you're meant to lead into. So those of us born in like 91, 92, we all have the North Node in Capricorn. We're here to be responsible. We're here to be elders. We're here to be wise, and we're here to like the universe really supports us the more responsibility we take on. And ironically, we naturally tend to run away from responsibility. We're not people that typically run into it headfirst and love it. And then the house that your North Node is in will tell you a lot about the area of life that you're really meant to play that out in. And so for me, that's in the second house of money and finances and resources and self-worth and all of these different things. So my spiritual path is literally around spiritual business and making my own money and learning how to provide for myself and learning how to share my gifts with the world. But yeah, I love the North Node. I think it's such an important part of the chart. What is yours?
Mine's Aries in the 6th house.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a placement too.
What'd you
I
say?
really like North Node is in like the 2nd house, the 6th house, the 10th house, because it's like, okay, you can put some energy into your career and into your purpose and be really supported in that.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel right. So Libra is my South node. So,
Yeah.
taking a step back or, making sure everyone else is great and everyone else is fine. In the last couple of years, it's been like, no, you're meant to be selfish in this lifetime and go
Yes.
first, right? Which is like, years ago, I was like, I never wanted anyone to look at me. And like you said before, I wouldn't have thought I'd have a podcast and be on YouTube and sharing and talking and speaking. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been an edge, but I feel like I'm in the nodal return now too. So I really feel,
Exciting.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and both Libra and Cancer South nodes. So that's like everyone with a Capricorn North node has a Cancer South node, and then everyone with an Aries North node has a Libra South node. And the thing that we have in common is that we have so much of a tendency to lean into people pleasing and codependency and all of those things. And we're really here to do our own thing and create our own path. So it's interesting too, because you'll see these kind of shared lessons or understandings between different nodal signs too.
And they're all cardinal too, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, they all start a new season. Yeah, that's amazing. I must have picked up on that like business energy because I'm like, why are we talking about like the background of your business? We're here to talk about like astrology and human
You're like, what's
design,
happening? Yeah.
but it makes sense. So yeah, so North Node and then South Node. And how do the node do you node can you find the nodes in your human design or is that like
Yeah.
completely separate? Okay.
No, they're a pretty significant part of the human design chart, actually. So they're in there as well.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
'cause I know a little bit about okay, so let's back up because I haven't shared about human design in a little bit. So you feel like you learn them side by side, right? And you feel like they complement each other
Yes.
side by side.
100%. Yes.
So when someone is looking at their human design chart, what do you feel are kind of important, I don't know, important factors to look
Yeah.
at if they are desiring to start a business or they're desiring to find their purpose?
Yeah. I think human design is so interesting in that in order to implement it properly, you really do have to get out of like the thinking logical mind and that part of you that wants to know everything. And I find that a lot of people go into human design and they want to know everything. They want to know all their gates. They want to know what planet aligns with what gate. Like there's this rabbit hole that you go down. And not that that's like there's a lot of fun in that and it can be really exciting. But the most important thing is to implement what you're learning. So if you're going to learn something, I do think there's something really magical about following your intuition. I don't think that there's necessarily a one size fits all path for everyone. But if you're going to learn something, you have to implement it and you have to start to work towards what would it look like for me to live my life knowing that this is a possible truth about myself. I really like that human design considers itself to be an experiment. So you're not supposed to take it too seriously. It's meant to be really
Like
playful.
life.
Yeah, and it's meant to be something that you try on. You try different things out and you keep what works and you leave what doesn't. But I think the most important things, if you're only going to pick a couple things to learn in your human design, is your energy type, your profile, and your incarnation cross.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are kind of like the foundations. And then from there, then you can start to expand into the other things.
Yeah, I've definitely delved into human design and I've heard, I feel like astrology is the same. It's like it's a never ending
Never
rabbit
ending.
hole.
Yeah,
And
it's
you could just
always.
like I minored in psych, so I feel you, girl. It's like I
Yeah.
can go deep and then be like, well, I just learned a lot of stuff. Okay, well, how am I going to implement it? But I love that you share that. Like if you're going to learn something, yeah, embody it, right? Like take it on, experiment with it.
Yes. Yeah, because that's the only way that it really works. Like human design is not meant to be just another like system of understanding yourself that we use to like pigeonhole people, right? It's like, yes, of course, it's meant to help you understand yourself, but ultimately it's the science of deconditioning. So it's meant to help you become your most authentic, true self, like the you that you would be if you had never been conditioned to be how we have to be in order to operate in the world. So just knowing your design, but not taking steps to implement it, it's fun, but it's not life changing in the way that it can be if you do the work.
Yeah, I feel like I really began resonating with the gates, and I know that's like kind of level 2, right? It's like, okay, you want to dive into, yeah, the imprints and like the energy you're embodying. So I forgot which one. I think it's gate 15, the one about consistency or like
Yeah, lack of
lack
consistency.
of consistency. I have
Yeah.
never felt so seen in my life, Giselle.
Yes. Well, and that is the thing. That's why I say like trusting your intuition is important too. So I'm also not the type of person where I'm like, no, you shouldn't learn about your gates until you know the other stuff. Like if you're really pulled or called into a gate, that's fine too. But yes, the gates for me is also where human design gets really like really magical.
Can you talk more about I feel like yeah, some people listening to that are listening to this are going to listen to this. I could like already tap in. They're just like, Gates, what? So if you're looking at your human design chart, right, there are different centers. Can you talk about when a center is open versus closed?
Yes, yeah. So there's technically three ways that a center can be. It can be defined, undefined, or open. And so a defined center is any of those centers that are colored in. And that's going to be an energy that you carry within you. So that's an energy that you have to kind of like make peace with it within yourself. And you have to learn how to navigate those waters of whatever that is and kind of learn how to like learn the map of it.
Mm,
Yes. Um, the undefined centers are centers where it's white and it's not colored in, but you have a colored in line or what we would call a gate connected to it. So those are energies where you're going to be pulling in and amplifying whatever is in your environment. So you're more sensitive. And typically, whenever that does get activated, so say you're around someone else who has that defined, and then that energy is now activated in you, your experience of that center is going to be through whatever gates you have activated there. So that's where the gates come in. And then if you have no gates and it's open, it's white, then it's totally open. And your experience of that is going to be totally dependent on the environment that you're in. You're super sensitive to your environment in that area or when it comes to that energy.
interesting. Have you seen people's charts with like almost all open centers?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't have almost all open. This is where like I'm so thankful that I learned them side by side because I understand the background of it. What actually turns on a gate is whether a planet was in that gate at the time that you were born, which is
Mm,
what creates your, you know, how you have the numbers on both sides. So all of the numbers on the right correlate with gates that were activated at the time that you were born. And so that's your conscious self. And all of the numbers on the left correlate with gates that were activated 88 days before you were born, which is your unconscious self. So it's pretty rare to have more than one open center, but it does happen. And if that's happening, it's because you have one center or maybe two centers where like almost all of the gates are activated. And then that's a really like hotspot energy for you.
interesting. Can
Yeah.
you share more about like the conscious versus I
Yeah.
didn't realize that 88 the right side was like
Yeah.
that's like your birth. That not birth, but like your creation date, right? Is that what it's called?
Yes. So that will correlate with your birth chart. You know, you could put them side by side and those gates will line up with, you know, your birth chart. Um, Yeah, so in human design, there's just this belief that we have a design and a personality, that we have the mind and then we have the body. It's a system of duality and understanding the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine. So we bring these two charts together to just understand how those operate. Although I do find that you can have some gates that are conscious that you're not as attuned to, and then some that are subconscious and you're really attuned to it. I don't necessarily think that everybody is more conscious of their quote unquote conscious gates or their like birthday gates. But that is the theory.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
fascinating. And then the gates, like we kind of touched on that. What is the difference? And I might be screwing this up right now.
No,
To
it's okay.
to be very authentic.
It's a lot.
Like yeah, a hanging gate versus like a closed, is it closed
Or
gate?
like a channel. It would be
Channel,
like,
that's what it is.
yeah. So if you have like, this is where it gets confusing for people sometimes. If it's like half a line, like it's not a full line, it's not connecting two centers, it's a gate. If you have both sides of that, so you'll see like, for example, like gate 37 and gate 40, it'll create a full line in between the heart and the solar plexus, and then that's a channel. So the gates are energies that we carry within ourselves, but we're always looking for that other half so we can understand this part of ourselves more. So it's kind of, there's a lesson in it. It's a gift and it's a lesson. The channels are an energy that you know both sides of. You understand the full duality. And those are where your like superpowers are in a way.
Interesting. And not that we'll get into like partners and compatibility and stuff, but
No,
like
it's okay.
I find it fascinating. Like I've heard before, and I'd love to hear your perspective, right? When like business partners, romantic partners, doesn't matter, but like when you create a channel with someone, is, I don't want to say is that good or bad, but like how can that support you in that
Yeah,
relationship?
so this is where it gets super cool because it also really depends on the channel. So what the channel represents. But the more of those that we have where we create channels with another person, the more we'll have that feeling of like, this person completes me, they're my other half, or you have that really intense chemistry. Something that has been so interesting that I've watched in the spiritual community in the last few years. My background, like when I was a therapist, I did relationships. Like that was relationships
Oh,
and like love and connection is my first love. Like I still geek out over that so much. And so talking about like relationship compatibility from a human design lens is fascinating to me. And we've almost went too far into demonizing chemistry and thinking that it always means like that it's a karmic connection or that there's these past
trauma.
connections or it's trauma or whatever. But sometimes when you have that like immediate chemistry with someone, it's just that you're completing a lot of channels for each other. So there's an ability to understand each other, and then also a foreignness, and that like sense of someone being different is what's usually attractive.
Wow, so fascinating. Yeah, so and then like I'm a manifesting generator and I feel like I have 8 channels. Is it more so with like manifesting generator because we have more, I don't want to say energy in the chart, but
More defined centers. So definitely like MGs are going to be more likely to have more channels, and then reflectors have none, right? They
oh
have
my gosh.
gates because if they had a channel, it would make them at least a projector or a manifester. But I don't know. I've seen some projectors with a lot of channels too, and I've seen some generators with like only one. So it also just totally depends.
And then Manny Gens were the most common, right, in the world?
One of the most common, yeah. So generators and manifesting generators are the most common. The two of those make up about 70% of the population.
Interesting.
And people often hate hearing that. But the reason that generators and mad gens are the most common is like we're needed. Like, we can't have an entire planet full of projectors. It just like wouldn't work. It would throw off the balance. Like, it's still a massive gift to be a generator or a man-gen.
And why do you say that for those who don't know?
Yeah, so generators and man-gens bring like literal energy onto the planet. Like, we bring light onto the planet. Like, when someone tells me like, oh, I'm a light worker, I'm usually like, you're probably a generator. Like, if you resonate with that term and that mission and the whole thing. And so I like to think of it as like we're the battery source. We bring the energy, we bring everything. And so it's really, really important that there's a lot of us.
And then, so Manny, Jen, and then what would you say about manifestors? Like, what kind of energy do they bring?
So they are here to clear old energy off the planet and bring in new. So I like to think of them, and I know that this is like maybe not how everyone else would, but I think of them as like God's right hand man. Like, they have a direct line to source, and source is like, this has got to get done and it's got to get done today. So like, we're gonna put a manifestor on it because their energy is just really powerful. Like, it clears out anything, it clears out a room, it clears out anything. So they really move things out to create space for something new to come in.
I love that description. I
Yeah.
love hearing, like, I know a few human design readers, astrologers, like, I love hearing everyone's different lens. Like, I think
Yes.
that's also so important, right? It's like we can have 1,000 people, and this is for anyone listening too. It's like, if you feel called to be or do something, do it, because people need your lens, that's just something coming through me right now. Yeah, I think people just get so lost in the sauce of like, oh, there's so many of us. It's like, yeah, there are millions of podcasts. And I'm like, no, I know some people need to hear me and to hear my
Yes.
guests.
Well, that's exactly it.
Yeah. And so then who do we have left? Projectors. What do they do for society?
So then projectors are here to guide. So without projectors, generators and man-gens could be really busy doing
Yes.
nothing, like getting nothing done. So projectors really provide that support and that structure. And they're also very, very gifted at seeing people and seeing, where they should be. I like to think of them as like the foreman. Like, they walk in and they're like, you need to be here and you need to be there, and this is what we're doing today. And they're also taking over as leaders in the new paradigm. So they have a really important role. And then we also have reflectors, and they're our most sensitive beings. They are literally ruled by the moon. Like, they are lunar beings. And they're here to be sensitive. They're here to show us like where our gaps are in our own sensitivity or our own connection to each other. So they're really here to be kind of that, like, I've heard them talked about as like the canary in the coal mine. Like, they're really here to let us know if something's wrong and if the way that we're operating is not sustainable. The problem is that our society is very sick, and so our reflectors are typically very sick. But a healthy reflector is like irreplaceable in a community or in a project or in a work environment.
How many, because I know how rare they are. Like, I've only met, I think, 2 reflectors in my life.
Yeah.
Well, that I know of, but do you know how many you've read for?
Yeah, I actually, because no one makes content for reflectors. And so whenever we
Oh,
do, no, because they're just such a small group of people. And I think every reflector is so different. So creating content for them is hard because they're all very unique. But I've had quite a few, but obviously not that many. I've probably like read for one-on-one, maybe like 20 throughout my
interesting.
last 5 years, 6 years. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah. I always know when I have a reflector client, because immediately, like, before I look at their charts, I'm like, this person is so much like me. And I'm like, no, they're a reflector. They're just reflecting
Oh,
me.
wow,
Yeah,
they're the mirror.
they're the mirror.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard with reflectors, it's in their eyes. Like, there's this thing about Sandra Bullock, who, like,
Yeah.
she's a reflector, and like, I've always loved her. Like, I never talk about celebrities on this podcast. I
Yeah.
don't even care for celebrities. Like, ever since
Yeah.
I was little, don't care for them. But for some
Yeah.
reason, I've always loved her. And then I found out she was a reflector, and I was like, that makes sense.
Yes, she is. Yeah. Yeah, it is like I have some reflector clients that I've been working with for a few years, and they're just really, really special people. They kind of have that same energy of like animals and kids, like that purity that very few people really have. So I love working with them. But they're rare. They're less than 1% of the
Oh my
population.
gosh. That's so amazing. Do you feel like, just your opinion, that more reflectors will be born and like more projectors to kind of
Definitely
balance
more
out a little
projector.
bit?
Yeah, I there still will be always less projectors because if you think about it, like you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, right? So we can't have too many people on the planet that are here to do all that, leading and behind the scenes work. But they are starting to be incarnated more because we need them more. I don't know about reflectors. I think that maybe when our society is healthier, then
Mm,
maybe. But choosing an incarnation of being a reflector, like I bow down to those people. Like being on the planet right now as it is, being such a sensitive being, like that is some wise old soul energy, and you cannot convince me otherwise. So I wonder if more souls will choose that as
mm.
our society becomes healthier.
Amen, girl. Amen.
Yeah.
I feel everything, and I'm just like, I couldn't imagine being a reflector. I
Yeah.
wouldn't get out of bed.
Yeah, they struggle for sure, but they
Yeah.
also get to experience an insane amount of like joy and wonder too, because they're open to all of it. So it's really cool, I think, like a very cool life experience to sign up for, but challenging at times.
Yeah, and that brings me to because I have a friend that's a reflector, and I forget what it's like your not self, and then your
Yourself.
like your, yeah, like who you're meant to be, and their self is like surprise, I think, for reflectors. I
Yeah.
was just like, that's such a cool one. Like your
Yes.
essence
So
is to be surprised.
when they feel like the world is magic, that's how they know that they're in their authenticity, because life will just constantly surprise them and it'll be a space of wonder. Like if you hear like healthy reflectors will say like, yeah, then this just showed up and I don't know how it happened and I don't know how I got here and I'm just so happy to be here. And like it really is just that, like so much synchronicity and magic comes into their lives when they're in a space of authenticity.
And then their not self is, I don't remember what it
Um,
is.
it can be anything really. Like I know that I actually can't remember. It might be disappointment,
That would
like
make sense.
two generators. But my experience with my reflector clients is actually that it could be the whole range of all of it. And I think that like that's where this experimentation piece comes in. I know most human design readers have certain things that they find that don't necessarily go along with the source material, and then they figure something else out. And that is something I've noticed with my reflector clients is they can be angry, they can be disappointed, they can be frustrated, they can be bitter, they can be all of it.
And then projectors, what's their self?
Yeah, so projectors will feel successful. They'll feel like I am on path, I am successful,
And
right?
then
And they'll,
manifestors.
yeah, so here's how, so projectors will feel successful if they're on their, in their authenticity. And again, like I am really careful with this because it could show up in such different ways, but they'll be bitter,
Mm,
if they're in their not self, right? Manifestors will typically, like the best way to describe it is that they'll feel free if they're in their authenticity. They'll feel very like in control and in power of their own lives. If they're in their not self, they'll feel really angry. And then with generator types, both gens and generators, we will feel like it says satisfaction, but really it's like happiness. We'll feel
mm.
excited about life, right? And then if we're in our not self, we feel frustrated We're like, nothing's happening. What's going on? I'm
Yes.
frustrated.
100%. And is peace too for Manny Gens? I feel like I've heard of like peace being one.
Yes, so that's part of the manifestor one. So again, like that's where I have some manifestor clients and they're like, I don't feel peace ever. Sometimes like I don't think that's necessarily always that you're in your not self. It's that for them, freedom feels like peace. So it's like helping people find the language of like what Ra'uruhu was trying to communicate. And that's what he was a manifestor. And so he built this life where he had a ton of freedom, which made him feel very at peace. So I think that's why that's the word he
Got
used.
it. Interesting.
Yes, but Manny Gens also will feel that too because of that manifestor part of us. But we're more like it's more important, I think, to pay attention to the generator part of like, are you happy?
Are we happy? I feel like that's like a lifelong.
Yeah. Well, it is,
Question.
and this is the thing. Like, I don't know anyone that's in their like authentic self 100% of the time. It just doesn't happen. You're always.
I mean, it's not like we came to Earth. Like that's like for other lifetimes. That's for like all the times where we weren't human. Like we literally came here to feel all the shit, everything.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, and I have the rhythm gate. So I'm always like moving through rhythms, moving through the flow, moving through, like honoring the highs, honoring the lows. It's just, yeah.
Always
Maybe is it the channel? I get confused sometimes with
515.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I call that the fairy channel because you guys are like so attuned to nature and the cosmos and to, ethereal beings. Almost all of the people that I know who can communicate with animals have that channel.
Yeah, that's me.
Yes, it's a very like special channel. And I didn't name it that. I got it from a girl. I think her human design is like the collective society or something like that. She hasn't posted a lot. I don't know if she even does human design work anymore, but I read a blog post of hers where she called it the fairy channel. And I was like, yes, that is like the most accurate description.
I've definitely had past lives as fairies and I work with them. They've helped me manifest.
Yeah, that makes sense. The 515 is very magical.
Yeah. It's again that, like frustration, like, oh, it's not going fast enough. And it's like, no, you gotta stay with the rhythm.
Everything happens in divine timing. Yeah, especially for you.
Yeah. No forcing. The forcing of our society, it's like always there in the background. I'm like, people are just like, Michelle. And I'm like, not yet. I can't do it yet.
Yeah, and most of us just aren't meant to be doing that.
Yeah. I want to shift into like a quick, like mini quick, because I know we don't have a lot of time yet, but like we're filming this December 8th and probably, you guys will probably be hearing this a week later, 2 weeks later, but what are some themes astrologically do you feel people get to, like, I guess, tune into towards the last week of the year, early 2024, anything that's like really popping out at you as an astrologer?
Yeah, so I really like this is kind of like, I've been working with this a lot this week because I'm creating a lot for our membership surrounding this. And I was thinking about like, what is the most significant thing to pay attention to when we change years? And of course, like looking at the year ahead in terms of astrology is really important. But the one thing that is really significant, and I know a lot of people, astrologers especially, often don't like to celebrate the new year because technically our new year is that astrology new year. But we're changing, like numerology is really important, and the numerology of the year is really significant. And so I'm really excited for 2024 because it's an 8-year, and 8 years can be so magical. We can experience so much change. We can really 8 years are about that give and take. There could be a massive expansion in terms of money and finances and abundance. And then also just like a reclamation of your own power. So I really see like 2024 can be a year where you can make really big quantum leaps, which is really significant. And then I really like to look at where Saturn and Jupiter are for the year. So for all of the year, Saturn is in Pisces. So like I made a joke years ago about like the Saturn and Pisces transit of like that's when everyone's going to become sober. That is really what's happening, you know. So we're really meant to pay attention to our vices and the ways that we numb and the way that we kind of like get out of our body so that we don't have to handle the sensitivity and to be present with the human experience, right? And then Jupiter. So Jupiter is in Taurus right now. It'll be shifting into Gemini. The sign is important, but it's also just really important to know what house like Jupiter is going to be in for you. So for those of you that know how to look in your chart, like looking for Taurus, looking for Gemini, those areas of life are going to be really like expanded for you. Jupiter in Taurus is really great for self-worth and nervous system work and all of those kinds of things. In May, it'll move into Gemini, which really expands communication. Really expands our curiosity. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens the last half of the year with that shift.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are the big things. Of course, there's a lot more going on.
Oh, there's so much always, right?
Yes, yeah. But those are always like, if I'm trying to boil it down for people and make it really simple, like what's the number of the year? Where's Jupiter? Where's Saturn? If you know those three things, you're pretty set up for the year.
Yeah. And then I also love looking at like your personal year too, right?
Yes.
So like for anyone listening, the numerology of the year is 8 is going to be 8 because it's 2024. 2 plus 2 plus 4 is 8. But then you can look at your birth, what's your birth date and then the year, right?
Yes.
The current year.
Yeah. So the month plus the date plus the current year will tell you what year you're on.
Yeah. Interesting. I can't remember. I think mine's going to be a 6.
Oh, yeah.
Changes.
Mine lines up, so I get really lucky. I'm an 8.
It's gonna be a double 8 for you. That's exciting.
Yeah, so I'm really, really excited for it. But yeah, that could be a really beautiful way to work with the year too.
Yeah, I love numerology. I love how simple it is, and then I love how powerful it could be at the same time.
Yeah, and I find that the more simple something is, the more powerful it usually tends to be too, right? It's like then you can really implement it and put it into action, and it's got that like groundedness.
Yeah, I also heard for Saturn and Pisces, I'm sure you've been hearing it too. It's like a lot of the guru syndrome, a lot of like spiritual leaders, and I'm air quoting for those of you who are just listening on a podcast, not on YouTube, but like a lot of the guru spiritual leaders are going to be called out if they're like really not in alignment with truth.
Yeah, we started that. Yes, 100%. We started that with Saturn and Aquarius. So like that initiated that. And then now with Saturn and Pisces, that's gonna, go even deeper. And it all like works in cycles. The reason for that is that then when Saturn moves into Aries, we're all reclaiming our self-authority. So in order for that to happen, we have to let go of that external authority. So it is going to be a really big couple years for the spiritual community, for sure. I think we're going to see a lot more of those like twin flame universe, type documentaries, like all of that kind of stuff. A lot of our shadow is going to come up.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, Gisele, this has been amazing. We talked about all the
Our
things.
time went by really, really fast. This went by crazy fast.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom. And
thank you for having me.
Where can people find you? What offerings do you have currently?
Yeah, so I'm at the Cosmic Laundry on everything: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Pinterest, whatever. Wherever you're like looking, that's the username. I've got a lot of things always on the go because I'm also a Gen. But the thing I'm most excited about right now is that membership that I was talking about. It's like really this year I want to teach people how to live in alignment with the cosmos and like work with that energy instead of trying to fight it. So that's something I'll probably be launching that this week for 2024. And then we do readings, I have mentorship, we have, some courses and things like that online. So we have basically anything that you need to kind of get started in just learning.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I personally have been learning so much from you in the last couple of weeks. So thank you for being
Yeah,
here.
no, I'm happy to be here. And thank you for having me, even though I've been sick. So I'm glad that it worked out and we were able to make some space.
Yay.